The rain fell in relentless sheets over the streets of New York, bouncing off neon signs and reflecting puddles that shimmered like liquid fire. From the Marconi Tower, the heart of Vincent Moretti's empire, the city seemed almost serene, but inside, tension coiled like a living creature. Vincent sat behind his polished mahogany desk, the dim glow of a single lamp casting shadows across his chiseled features. Every line of his face told of battles won, empires claimed, and enemies erased. Silence ruled the office like a decree, but tonight, it was different. Tonight, someone dared. A knock echoed sharply, and the door creaked open. A young woman appeared, drenched from the storm, her chest heaving as she clutched the door frame. Her eyes, wide with a mixture of fear and defiance, locked on him. "Shoot me if you dare," she whispered, her words sharper than any gunshot. Vincent froze. Nobody had ever spoken to him this way. Nobody had dared step into the storm of his presence without flinching. His hand hovered near his desk, yet he did not move. The air thickened, charged with anticipation, as if even the city held its breath. Her heart pounded like a drum of rebellion, a mixture of fear and exhilaration coursing through her veins. She knew the danger, knew the reputation, yet she refused to step back. "I know what you did," she said, voice steady. "I know who you really are. And I won't be afraid." Vincent's eyes, cold and calculating, softened slightly, not with warmth, but curiosity. Slowly, deliberately, he leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking under his weight. "Nobody," he said finally, low and deliberate, "breathes without my permission here." The words were not a threat, they were a declaration, a law of survival in the world he commanded. Thunder rolled over the city like the heartbeat of a restless giant. In that instant, the world outside ceased to exist. She stepped closer, compelled by a force she could not name. "I won't run. I won't beg. I'm here because I have to be. And you have to listen." Vincent's gaze sharpened, the faintest smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. He gestured to the chair opposite him. She moved forward, stepping into the lion's den of New York's most dangerous empire. Hours passed like seconds. Words were unnecessary, tension was a language of its own. Every second drew them closer in a web of unspoken recognition, of power tested against defiance. In those moments, she glimpsed the man beneath the Mafia king, the man capable of loyalty, of restraint, of something that could not be conquered by fear or empire. And Vincent realized, for the first time in decades, that someone had cracked his armor not with force, but with courage, audacity, and the sheer force of humanity. Outside, the storm raged, reflecting the chaos inside. Every heartbeat was amplified, every breath a shared secret. They were locked in a dangerous dance of power and intrigue, defiance and fascination. One wrong move could mean death. Yet neither moved away. In that room, under the dim lamp, amidst the city of shadows, something fragile but undeniable took root, an unexpected bond, dangerous and intoxicating, born of fear, respect, and something far more human. As lightning struck the skyline, illuminating the office in harsh white light, Vincent spoke again. "You are brave," he murmured, voice low, almost a confession. "More than you should be." Her gaze met his, steady, unwavering. "I didn't come here to be brave," she said softly. "I came because the truth matters." For the first time, Vincent felt a tremor in the foundations of his control, not of the empire, but of himself. She was changing the rules of his world, not with a gun or a deal, but with her presence, her courage, and the dark, unyielding pull of unexpected love. And in that silence, filled with thunder and tension, the city outside continued its indifferent pulse. But inside the tower, a new chapter had begun, a story of power, danger, and humanity, one that would shake the foundations of the Mafia hood and test the limits of loyalty, survival, and desire. The city never slept, and neither did its whispers. Even after the confrontation in the Marconi Tower, Vincent could feel the undercurrent of the Mafia hood pulsing through every street, alley, and shadowed doorway. Rival factions were always watching, always calculating, always seeking the smallest crack in his armor. Yet tonight, the empire felt fragile. Not because of the threats outside, but because of the storm she had unleashed within his carefully controlled world. She moved through his domain like a ghost unseen, but deeply felt. In the mafia clubs, where loyalty was enforced with bullets and fear, she navigated with surprising ease. Her eyes, sharp and aware, missed nothing. Vincent watched her from a distance, his piercing gaze tracking every movement, every choice. Each step she took near danger, each defiance of convention, only drew him closer to a truth he had long suppressed: he admired her. No, more than that, he feared and craved her influence on him. She challenged the king in ways no rival had dared, in ways that threatened to unravel his entire understanding of control, power, and even humanity. But the world they inhabited was unforgiving. Even as she learned the ways of his empire, the alliances with city officials, the networks of mafia clubs, the delicate balance of power, there were murmurs of betrayal. Vincent noticed small inconsistencies, reports arriving late, subtle glances between his lieutenants, financial movements that didn't add up. The web of loyalty he had spun over decades was beginning to fray, and the threat was internal. Someone he trusted was testing limits, feeding enemies information, plotting to seize what he had built. That night, he summoned her to his office, the storm outside a mirror of the tension inside. "There's treachery in my ranks," he said, voice low, deliberate, his eyes scanning her reaction. She stood firm, unafraid, though a subtle tension gripped her. "I can help," she said. "Let me. I've seen enough to know how to find the cracks." He studied her for a long moment. Trusting her was dangerous not just for her life, but for the stability of the empire. Yet he saw something rare: insight, courage, and intuition that surpassed many of his most loyal men. Together, they began the careful, silent work of unmasking the betrayer. She slipped into the clubs, blending with shadows, listening to whispers, piecing together patterns he could not see from the tower. Each revelation brought them closer, both in partnership and in subtle, undeniable attraction. Fingers brushed over ledgers, eyes met across crowded rooms, and tension thickened into something almost unmanageable. Their connection grew not only from shared danger but from mutual respect, two forces colliding in the dangerous world of power, betrayal, and dark desire. The confrontation came quickly, with all the inevitability of a storm. The lieutenant, a man once trusted implicitly, was summoned under the pretense of a routine meeting. Vincent's eyes, sharp and lethal, bore into him as the evidence of betrayal unfolded: intercepted messages, financial discrepancies, and witness testimonies that left no room for denials. "Intentions don't matter," Vincent said, voice low, smooth, and deadly. "Results do. And your results have endangered everything." The man's confident facade crumbled, revealing a fear that mirrored the respect and terror Vincent commanded. The girl watched silently, understanding the calculus of loyalty, power, and survival. This was not merely a lesson in obedience, it was a demonstration of the law of his world, where even the slightest misstep could cost everything. The lieutenant was stripped of power and exiled from the empire, a warning that reverberated through every street and shadowed corner of the city. In the aftermath, Vincent and she stood together, the quiet hum of the city below contrasting the storm of adrenaline that still lingered in their veins. She had seen the ruthless precision of his power firsthand, yet also glimpsed a man who was capable of restraint, fairness, and an almost incomprehensible sense of humanity. Their hands brushed, a fleeting, electric contact, grounding them in a shared truth: survival, loyalty, and even dark, unexpected love, depended not only on strength but on trust. As the night stretched into early morning, a fragile connection had been cemented, a bond forged in fire, deception, and mutual recognition. Outside, the city hummed with the indifferent pulse of life, but inside the tower, two people had changed the rules of the game. She was no longer merely a witness, she was a partner, a force intertwined with the King of Shadows, his empire, and the dangerous, intoxicating allure of humanity that had never before entered his life. The storm had passed, but the threats remained. And for both of them, there was no turning back. The path ahead would demand courage, cunning, and choices that could tip the balance between love and destruction, loyalty and betrayal, power and survival. The streets of New York had never been more dangerous. Rival families, sensing weakness after the betrayal and exile of one of Vincent's lieutenants, began testing boundaries. Fires erupted in the alleyways of his controlled neighborhoods, and gunshots echoed like the heartbeat of a city teetering on chaos. Every corner held the potential for death, every shadow hid a predator. And yet, she moved through it all with uncanny awareness, guided by instincts that were now honed from weeks of navigating his empire. Vincent observed from the Marconi Tower, his gaze sharp, calculating, yet tinged with an unfamiliar emotion: concern, admiration, and something more intimate that he refused to name. The first assault was precise, meant to destabilize his mafia clubs and send a message to the kingpin who ruled with fear and precision. Explosions rocked one of the outer districts, flames consuming everything in their path. Vincent immediately mobilized his men, his orders crisp, ruthless, and absolute. But this time, he did not act alone. She was beside him, a shadow at his shoulder, anticipating moves, reading the behavior of his men, and offering strategies that even he hadn't considered. Her insight was invaluable, and every time their hands brushed while pointing at maps or exchanging documents, a subtle, electric tension ran between them. The battle raged through the night. Street by street, club by club, Vincent's forces clashed with the rival factions. Bullets tore through the rain, screams echoed against brick walls, and every decision could mean life or death. She fought beside him, courage blazing, refusing to step back even when fear whispered in the corners of her mind. Vincent noticed every movement, every calculated risk she took, and in the midst of violence, he realized something dangerous. He needed her not only to survive but, he craved her presence, her courage, her humanity in a world of blood and shadow. At one point, she found herself cornered by a group of rival soldiers. Gunmetal gleamed in the dim streetlight, and the taste of danger sharpened every sense. Just as the tension reached its peak, Vincent appeared, a phantom of calm and lethal precision. Within moments, he disarmed and neutralized the threat, the air thick with authority, power, and the silent acknowledgement of their bond. Their eyes met for a fleeting second, breaths caught, and a silent message passed: survival was not just a battle, it was a connection forged in the fire of chaos. The aftermath of the first assault left the streets smoking, but it also cemented an unspoken truth. They were stronger together, not just as allies in survival but as forces intertwined by respect, trust, and a burgeoning, dangerous attraction. Vincent, who had always ruled with cold calculation, began bending his own rules to ensure her safety. And she, fearless yet human, began to see the man beneath the king, the weight of his choices, the loneliness behind his power, and the rare flickers of tenderness reserved for someone who dared confront him. As dawn approached, the two stood atop a reclaimed club, looking over the city. Lights flickered through the fog, and the hum of New York carried the sense of a world that had been tested and survived. "You shouldn't have come," Vincent said quietly, voice low and almost intimate, cutting through the hum of the city. "It was reckless." She smiled softly, wet hair clinging to her face, eyes bright with defiance. "And yet, here we are. Together." It was more than survival, it was a declaration of mutual dependence. In the world of power, fear, and shadow, trust was rare, and affection rarer still. Yet in that quiet moment above the chaos of the streets, they shared something dangerous and undeniable, a bond forged in fire, blood, and the unspoken potential of dark, intoxicating love. But the night had proven one thing: threats would not stop. Rival families would regroup, spies would continue to lurk in the shadows, and the empire, no matter how vast, was fragile. Every choice, every move, and every heartbeat now carried weight far beyond their own survival. The path ahead would demand strategy, courage, and the willingness to risk everything, not just for power, but for the fragile, dangerous connection that had grown between them. The sun rose over New York, its light glinting off skyscrapers and puddles alike, as if illuminating a world forever changed. Vincent's eyes, dark and calculating, turned toward her. She was no longer merely a witness in his empire, she was a partner, a force that challenged him, humanized him, and drew him into a dangerous, uncharted territory he had long denied himself, the possibility of unexpected love. The city had grown restless. Even after the last night's chaos, the streets pulsed with whispers of rebellion and vengeance. Rival families, humiliated and enraged by the failed assaults, were regrouping, planning bolder strikes. Vincent knew every alleyway, every mafia club, every shadowed corner of the city, but tonight, knowledge alone wouldn't be enough. Strategy was key, precision essential, and loyalty a fragile currency that could crumble with one careless move. She stood beside him in the Marconi Tower, the glow of the city lights casting long shadows across their faces. Maps and files littered the desk before them, detailing contacts, city officials, and networks of influence. Her eyes scanned the intelligence, absorbing it faster than anyone else in the room. "We can anticipate their next moves," she said, voice steady, calm, and almost commanding. Vincent regarded her with a mixture of surprise and admiration. Her insight had grown sharper with each passing day, and he realized that she was no longer just a guest in his empire, she was a partner, a mind to match his own. The first counterattack was swift. Using her observations, Vincent's men moved through the city like shadows, reclaiming lost territories, intercepting shipments, and asserting dominance over rival factions. She watched from the command room, her pulse quickened not from fear, but from the thrill of being part of something bigger, something dangerous, something that mattered. And Vincent noticed every subtle movement, the way her hands clenched over documents, the intensity in her eyes, the courage in every calculated risk she took. Each moment drew him closer, tethering him to her in ways both professional and deeply personal. At night, when the city seemed to quiet only in appearance, they would meet in private rooms within the tower. The air between them was thick with tension, unspoken words, and fleeting touches that carried the weight of shared danger. One hand brushed over a file, and electricity passed between them. A fleeting glance across a dimly lit room spoke volumes of trust, attraction, and the unspoken possibility of dark love. Vincent, who had always ruled with fear and respect, now found himself navigating unfamiliar terrain, desire entwined with responsibility, power softened by human connection. But danger never rested. Intelligence revealed an assassination attempt planned for one of his closest allies. The girl's instincts proved invaluable, guiding Vincent through the labyrinth of threats, helping him anticipate every move. They moved together through the streets, silent, vigilant, and lethal in their coordination. Bullets tore through the night, rival soldiers fell under precise counterattacks, and each victory solidified not only Vincent's empire but the bond between him and the girl. Every shared victory, every life saved, drew them closer, entwining their fates more deeply than either had anticipated. In quieter moments, atop the Marconi Tower, they would watch the city below, lights flickering like stars captured in steel and concrete. "You should rest," Vincent said one night, voice low and measured, almost tender. She shook her head, determination etched across her face. "I can't. Not when there's so much at stake." He studied her, noting the courage, the defiance, and the humanity that seemed to radiate from her even in the darkest circumstances. And in that silence, a fleeting hand touch, a shared look, conveyed more intimacy than words ever could. The empire was being tested like never before. Every rival family's move, every betrayal from within, and every calculated strike Vincent ordered had consequences that rippled through the city. And yet, amidst the chaos, a rare truth emerged: power alone was not enough. It was the connection between them built in fire, danger, and mutual respect that provided the strength to withstand everything the city threw at them. And as the nights grew longer, the stakes higher, and the shadows deeper, Vincent began to realize something profound. The girl had become more than an ally, more than a witness. She had become a force capable of altering the very course of his empire, challenging his instincts, awakening parts of him he had long buried, and forcing him to confront something he had always denied himself, the possibility of love, dark and consuming, amidst a world of power, fear, and unrelenting danger. The Marconi Tower never truly slept. Even in the dead of night, whispers of loyalty and treachery moved like phantoms through its halls. Vincent had always known that betrayal could come from anywhere, even the people closest to him. But this time, the threat was more personal. A trusted lieutenant, a man who had stood by his side for years, was secretly feeding information to a rival faction. The revelation came slowly, as most dangerous truths do, buried beneath layers of routine reports, hesitant glances, and small, calculated errors that Vincent's keen instincts could not ignore. She was the first to notice the subtle cues that hinted at the deception. "Something is off," she whispered one evening, leaning over the table of intelligence files. Her eyes, sharp and focused, scanned the irregularities that Vincent had initially dismissed as minor. "He's hiding something. And it's dangerous." Vincent studied her, the shadows of the office flickering over his angular face. Trusting her instincts was risky not just for the Empire, but for her life. Yet every day she proved herself invaluable, capable of insight, courage, and judgment beyond her years. Finally, he nodded, slow and deliberate. "Then we uncover it. Together." Their investigation led them through the streets, mafia clubs, and secret meeting rooms of the city. Every step was a test of skill, loyalty, and nerve. Rival factions prowled like wolves, sensing weakness, every corner hid potential death. She moved with a calculated bravery, relying on instincts honed by weeks of exposure to Vincent's dangerous world. He watched her, noting every decision, every subtle movement, feeling a dangerous pull he could neither deny nor control. In the midst of chaos, their bond strengthened, woven from trust, shared danger, and the flickering, intoxicating pulse of dark love. The betrayal came to a head one storm-laden night. Vincent's lieutenant arranged a meeting in a secluded warehouse, under the guise of exchanging critical intelligence. She and Vincent arrived together, moving silently through the shadows. The lieutenant smiled, a mask of loyalty barely concealing his intent. As the meeting progressed, Vincent subtly revealed that he knew of the treachery. The man's eyes widened, panic flickering across his face as Vincent's voice cut through the tension like steel. "Intentions don't matter. Results do. And your results have endangered everything." Chaos erupted immediately. Hidden gunmen emerged from the darkness, bullets slicing through the air. She reacted instinctively, ducking and firing with precision, her courage unwavering even as danger encircled them. Vincent moved with lethal calm, neutralizing threats with deadly efficiency, a shadow in the storm of violence. The city's night seemed to hold its breath as bullets tore through the warehouse, echoing like drums of judgment. Every glance between them, every fleeting touch in the chaos, reinforced an unspoken truth: they survived together, and in that survival, their connection had grown beyond fear, beyond power, beyond the reach of the world around them. By the time the dust settled, the betrayer lay neutralized, his influence erased, and the warehouse silent save for the rain tapping against the roof. She stood beside Vincent, breathing heavily, her eyes locked on his. "We made it," she said softly, though both knew how narrowly. He nodded, his hand brushing hers, a fleeting contact that carried more weight than any words could convey. "You've changed the rules of this world," he said quietly. "Not just mine, but everything I've built." She met his gaze steadily, heart pounding, fear and exhilaration intertwining. "Then let's change it together," she replied. The aftermath of betrayal left its mark. Loyalty within the Empire had been tested, power had been asserted, and the bond between Vincent and the girl had been forged in fire, blood, and trust. Every street, every shadow, every corner of the city now seemed charged with possibility and peril. And yet, amidst the danger, one truth remained undeniable: their connection, born of defiance and survival, had transformed into something neither could resist, something as intoxicating and perilous as the Empire itself. In the quiet hours after the battle, atop the Marconi Tower, they surveyed the city below, lights glinting like distant stars. "You shouldn't have come," Vincent murmured, voice low, tinged with something softer than authority. "It was reckless." She smiled, hair damp and eyes shining with defiance and admiration. "And yet, here we are. Still standing. Together." That single moment encapsulated everything, the risk, the danger, and the inescapable pull of dark love, trust, and humanity amidst the empire of shadows. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside, yet they stood united. Every betrayal, every threat, every pulse of fear and desire had brought them closer, entwining their fates in a world where power, loyalty, and love could shift in an instant. And for both of them, there was no turning back. The city, the empire, and their hearts had been forever changed. The city was no longer just a backdrop, it had become a battlefield. Rival families, smarting from previous failures, had consolidated forces. Every street corner could conceal an assassin, every whisper could signal betrayal. Vincent knew the stakes, the empire he had built over decades, the respect he commanded, and the fragile network of allies were all under imminent threat. But this time, he was not alone. She moved beside him not just as an observer, but as a strategist, a partner, and a force he had learned to trust with his life. The planning sessions in the Marconi Tower grew longer, more intense. Maps sprawled across tables, contacts were analyzed, routes plotted, and contingencies prepared for every conceivable scenario. She leaned over his shoulder, pointing out details he had initially overlooked, the subtle alliances between minor factions, the hidden loyalties of city officials, and even patterns in the rival families' past attacks. "They think chaos will weaken us," she said, voice steady, "but we can turn it into advantage." Vincent's gaze lingered on her, dark eyes reflecting a mix of admiration, desire, and something he refused to name. "You see the world differently," he murmured. "And I need that vision." The first strike against the rivals was swift and brutal. Vincent's men moved with precision through the city, reclaiming territories and dismantling enemy operations before the rival leaders could fully react. She observed and guided from the shadows, her instincts razor-sharp, her decisions critical in the execution of the plans. Every brush of hands over maps, every shared glance across dimly lit offices, carried an intensity neither could ignore. The tension between them had grown into something far more dangerous than the city's streets: desire, respect, and dark, intoxicating love. Amid the chaos, moral choices became unavoidable. Innocent lives occasionally intersected with the machinations of empire, forcing Vincent to make decisions that weighed power against humanity. She challenged him, not with rebellion, but with insight. "We can strike without destroying them," she said, voice firm, "without losing ourselves to fear and blood." Vincent paused, considering the humanity she invoked, a reminder that even kings of shadows could still hold on to morality. It was a delicate balance, ruthless strategy tempered by compassion, power tempered by restraint, and dark love tempered by shared trust. Night after night, their bond deepened. They moved through the city together, always close, always synchronized. In moments of quiet between attacks, atop rooftops overlooking the city, they would share glimpses of vulnerability, her hand brushing his, a soft smile exchanged, a fleeting conversation revealing the human beneath the legend. Vincent, a man who had never allowed weakness, felt something unfamiliar, the warmth of connection, the thrill of forbidden closeness, and the undeniable pull of a love forged in fire and danger. Yet the rival families were relentless. Intelligence revealed a coalition had formed, planning an all-out assault aimed at crippling his empire at its core. The city's streets would erupt in violence once more, and the empire's survival depended on every decision, every movement, every ounce of calculated courage. She looked at him, eyes bright with determination. "We'll face it," she said simply. "Together." Vincent's response was a rare, slow smile, a blend of respect, fascination, and the unspoken acknowledgement of the dangerous bond between them. The first confrontation of the coalition erupted in a warehouse on the edge of the city. Bullets ricocheted, flames ignited shadows, and chaos reigned. She moved with lethal grace, guided by instinct and experience gained under Vincent's tutelage. He fought beside her, orchestrating defenses with the precision of a master strategist, yet unable to resist stealing glances at her, noting every movement, every decision, every spark of courage that drew him closer to a truth he had long denied. She had become indispensable not just to his empire, but to the man he was becoming. By dawn, the first wave had been repelled, the rival families' forces fractured and scattered. The city, for a moment, seemed to breathe again. They stood together on the roof of a reclaimed club, the skyline glowing in the early morning light. Vincent's voice broke the silence. "Every battle reminds me why I cannot let you go," he said quietly, tone low and intimate. She met his gaze steadily, heart racing, aware of the danger but unwilling to retreat. "And every day with you reminds me that surviving isn't enough," she whispered. "We must endure, together." In that moment, the empire, the city, and the fragile threads of their dark love converged. They had faced chaos, betrayal, and mortal danger, and had emerged not just victorious, but bonded in a way that transcended the rules of power. Yet both knew the storm was far from over. Rivals still lurked, shadows still moved, and every heartbeat carried the weight of survival, trust, and desire. The rising sun reflected off the skyscrapers like fire against steel. Vincent's eyes lingered on her, realizing that power, respect, and control were meaningless without the human connection she had brought into his life. In the heart of a city built on fear, blood, and shadow, they had discovered something far more dangerous and intoxicating: dark, consuming love, forged in fire, strengthened by loyalty, and tested by survival. The city had become a battlefield where the very air seemed charged with danger. Rival families, bruised by previous defeats, had united under a single, ruthless coalition. Their aim was clear: topple Vincent Moretti's empire, strip him of power, and claim the city for themselves. Every street, every alley, every mafia club was a potential battlefield. The night was their domain, shadows their allies, and bullets their language. Vincent's forces moved with precision, yet even the best-laid plans were tested under the weight of sheer chaos. Explosions ripped through warehouses, gunfire shattered the night, and screams echoed through alleyways drenched in rain. Amid this controlled anarchy, she moved beside him, fearless, calculated, instinct guiding every decision. Her courage was a light in the darkness, and Vincent noticed it in ways he hadn't anticipated: not just admiration, but a stirring, dangerous longing that defied the cold calculations he had relied on for decades. The first ambush came on an empty street near one of his reclaimed clubs. Rival soldiers emerged from the shadows, guns raised, their intent deadly. She reacted instinctively, ducking and firing, her precision a testament to her growing mastery of survival in this world. Vincent was beside her within seconds, neutralizing threats with ruthless efficiency, moving like a shadow incarnate. Their eyes met for the briefest moment amid the chaos, hands brushing as they coordinated movements. It was more than survival: it was a silent acknowledgement of trust, reliance, and a bond forged in peril. The battle spilled into the streets, where their men clashed with the enemy in a symphony of violence. Cars ignited under gunfire, debris littered the roads, and the city seemed to pulse with the heartbeat of conflict. Vincent and she moved as one, instinct and strategy intertwined, each covering the other, each anticipating the next move. In fleeting moments, amidst bullets and screams, glances and touches conveyed an intimacy neither dared voice but both understood. Every brush of fingers, every hand on an arm, every shared look carried the weight of trust, desire, and dark, forbidden attraction. Amidst the chaos, moral choices gnawed at Vincent. Innocents were caught in the crossfire, and each life lost reminded him of the fine line between power and humanity. She, too, challenged him, questioning strategies that risked unnecessary harm. "We can win without becoming monsters," she said quietly during a brief lull, her voice cutting through the chaos. Vincent paused, her words striking deeper than any rival bullet. Power was necessary, fear was effective, but humanity fragile, dangerous, and intoxicating was the true measure of control. The night stretched endlessly, battles erupting in waves across the city. At one point, she was trapped behind a toppled delivery truck, surrounded by enemy soldiers. Heart pounding, breath shallow, she thought the moment had come, but Vincent appeared, moving through the shadows with lethal grace, disarming the threats, clearing a path. As they escaped, soaked and trembling from exertion and rain, their hands clasped instinctively, a lifeline in a city that demanded vigilance and courage. By dawn, the coalition had been repelled, but the scars of battle were everywhere: burned streets, fractured alliances, and the ever-present reminder that power demanded sacrifice. They stood together atop the Marconi Tower, surveying the city they had defended. The silence between them was charged, a moment of reprieve, yet heavy with unspoken words. "Every night," Vincent said quietly, voice low, "I wonder how I survived before you." She met his gaze, emotions a storm of fear, pride, and something far more dangerous. "And I wonder how I ever thought I could survive without you," she replied, her voice steady yet intimate. In those moments, the city seemed to pause. Power, respect, and control were constants, but amidst the fires of war, they had discovered something that defied all calculation: connection, trust, and a dark, consuming love that neither could resist. The empire was secure for now, but the dangers of the streets, rival coalitions, and hidden betrayals still lingered like shadows, waiting for the slightest mistake. The rising sun illuminated the scars and triumphs of the night, painting the city in fiery gold. Vincent turned to her, his expression a rare mixture of vulnerability and authority. "We are stronger together," he murmured. "And yet, I fear what comes next." She smiled softly, a mixture of defiance and understanding. "Then we face it," she said, voice unwavering. "Together." And in that unspoken promise, the night's fire, the city's chaos, and the dangerous, intoxicating bond they shared merged into a single truth: survival, power, and love, dark, consuming, and unstoppable, were intertwined, and neither could walk away from the other. The morning after the citywide chaos was deceptive in its calm. Streets were littered with remnants of battle-burned vehicles, shattered glass, and the faint smell of gunpowder, but Vincent's mind was already several steps ahead. The rival coalition had suffered losses, yet they were far from defeated. If he wanted the empire to survive, retaliation had to be swift, precise, and brutal. And this time, he would rely not just on force, but on her insight, intuition, and courage. They met in the Marconi Tower's war room, maps spread across the table, city intelligence projected on screens. She traced routes and highlighted weak points with precision. "They think splitting forces will protect them," she said, voice steady, eyes blazing. "But they've left gaps, vulnerabilities we can exploit. Not just with guns, but with strategy, influence, and fear." Vincent studied her closely, noting the clarity in her thought, the confidence in her voice. She was no longer a student or guest in his empire, she was a partner, a force he could rely upon in ways few ever had the privilege to. Night fell quickly, and with it, the city once again became a battlefield. Their counter-strike was swift. Coordination between Vincent's loyal soldiers and the girl's tactical insight allowed them to strike key points simultaneously. Rival clubhouses were reclaimed, secret warehouses seized, and alliances fractured from within. Bullets tore through shadows, rival leaders were neutralized, and every move reinforced Vincent's dominance. Yet amid the chaos, he never took his eyes off her, watching her navigate danger with lethal grace. Each brush of her hand against his during planning or in the heat of action sent a spark that neither could deny. The retaliation was not without peril. At one point, she was cornered in a narrow alley, bullets ricocheting off walls, her escape blocked by two heavily armed enemies. Heart racing, she ducked and rolled, narrowly avoiding gunfire. Vincent appeared in the nick of time, his presence like a shadow of death, neutralizing the attackers with precision. As the smoke cleared, he caught her hand instinctively, holding it tight. "You're reckless," he murmured, voice low, almost tender. "And yet, I cannot stop you." She smiled, a mixture of adrenaline and intimacy, leaning into the touch. "Then don't. We work best together." Beyond the battlefield, the emotional stakes grew higher. They shared fleeting moments of vulnerability, quiet conversations between attacks where they spoke not of strategy, but of life, fear, and what drew them to one another. Vincent, a man who had ruled with fear and authority for decades, began revealing glimpses of himself, fragments of humanity, tenderness, and even a dangerous capacity for love. She, in turn, allowed herself to lean on him, trusting him with thoughts and emotions that could have been exploited by anyone else. In the midst of violence and power struggles, they found a connection that was at once dangerous and essential. By dawn, the retaliation had achieved its purpose. Rival forces were fragmented, leaders humiliated or eliminated, and the Empire's power reinforced. Yet victory was bittersweet. The city bore scars, and the threat of new enemies or betrayals remained ever present. They stood together atop the Marconi Tower, surveying a city that was both conquered and fragile. Vincent's gaze lingered on her, his voice low, reverent. "Every night I survive with you by my side, I understand. Survival is meaningless without trust. Without you." She met his eyes steadily, her own voice soft but firm. "And I've realized that courage alone isn't enough, we need each other." In that shared silence, the storm of bullets, fire, and betrayal seemed distant. What remained was a fragile, intoxicating truth: they were partners in survival, in strategy, and in something far more dangerous: dark, consuming love that neither could escape, and neither could afford to. The city below sparkled like a battlefield frozen in time, a testament to power, human connection, and the relentless will to endure. Even as the first light of morning painted the skyline, Vincent knew that the challenges ahead would test not only their empire but their hearts. Rival families still lurked, the city's shadows hid secrets, and every decision could shift the balance of life, power, and desire. Yet in that moment, standing side by side, hand in hand, they were unstoppable, united by loyalty, strategy, and a bond that defied the world's rules, fear, and even death itself. The city seemed deceptively quiet, as if the violence of the past nights had been only a prelude to something far greater. Vincent stood in the Marconi Tower, his silhouette framed against the panoramic view of New York's skyline. The empire he had built, tested through fire, betrayal, and blood, now faced a final challenge. The coalition of rival families had regathered, more determined, more ruthless, and far more dangerous than ever. Every decision Vincent made in the coming hours could decide not only the fate of his empire but of the people he had sworn to protect and the girl who had become indispensable to him in ways he could barely admit to himself. She entered silently, her presence commanding without words. "They've consolidated forces at 3 key points," she said, pointing at the projected map on the war room screen. "If we strike simultaneously, we can fracture them permanently. But one misstep, and it could cost lives we cannot afford to lose." Vincent's eyes lingered on her, the weight of her insight, courage, and intuition pressing on him. He had come to rely on her judgment, yet more than that, he realized he relied on her as a constant, a presence in the storm that grounded him in a way no one ever had. Plans were made with precision. Every street, alley, and building was considered. Contingencies were crafted, escape routes calculated, and allies briefed. But beyond strategy, Vincent found himself wrestling with personal stakes he could not ignore. She was not merely a comrade, she had become a part of him, a force he could neither control nor resist. The thought of losing her in the coming battle was unbearable, yet he knew that their survival required taking risks neither of them could shy away from. Night fell, heavy and silent, the city beneath them unaware of the storm about to erupt. They moved through the streets with quiet purpose, Vincent's presence a constant shield, her courage a guiding light. Every glance, every brush of hands, every fleeting touch was laden with meaning, a dangerous intimacy that neither dared speak aloud. In this world of shadows, where power and death intertwined, their connection had grown into something inevitable and inescapable, a dark, consuming love forged in the fires of survival. The first strike came at a rival-controlled dockyard. Bullets tore through the night, flames igniting shadows, and chaos erupted as Vincent's forces moved with lethal precision. She navigated through the firefight with skill and courage, guiding soldiers, neutralizing threats, and keeping a steady hand on Vincent whenever danger came too close. Their eyes met across the smoke-filled battlefield, a silent acknowledgement of shared risk, trust, and desire. Every second was charged with intensity, every heartbeat a reminder of the stakes. From one location to another, the coalition's forces fell into Vincent's trap, their unity fracturing under the coordinated strikes. Yet the battle was far from over. The final confrontation loomed, an inevitable clash that would determine who ruled the city, who survived, and what sacrifices were required. Amid the chaos, Vincent and she found fleeting moments of connection, brief exchanges of words, touches, and glances that carried more meaning than entire conversations. In the midst of power, bullets, and shadows, they were anchored by one another, bound by trust, respect, and a dark, intoxicating love neither had anticipated. As the night stretched on, they paused atop a building, overlooking the city ablaze with conflict. Vincent's hand found hers, their fingers entwined instinctively. "Whatever happens tonight," he murmured, voice low and urgent, "we survive. Together." She met his gaze, fierce and unwavering. "We've already survived," she replied, "and we will endure whatever comes next." In that quiet, fleeting moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The city, the empire, and the shadows of danger converged, but so did something far more potent, the undeniable bond between two people who had found love amidst chaos, trust amidst betrayal, and humanity amidst power. The storm was coming, and when it hit, it would test everything they had built, everything they had fought for, and everything they felt for one another. And as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, Vincent knew one truth above all: nothing, neither rival families, betrayal, nor the chaos of the streets could sever what had begun between them. Together, they would face the storm. Together, they would endure. Together, they would define the future of the empire and of their dark, unbreakable love. The night was suffocatingly silent, a deceptive calm before the storm. Across the city, rival families had gathered their forces, ready to strike at the heart of Vincent Moretti's empire. The docks, abandoned warehouses, and back alleys had become a chessboard, each piece representing lives, power, and influence. Vincent, seated in the Marconi Tower with her by his side, studied every detail, every intel report, every subtle hint of movement in the shadows. His empire had survived countless attacks, but this would be the ultimate test, not just of power, but of loyalty, strategy, and trust. She leaned over the maps, tracing enemy positions with precision. "They've underestimated us," she said, voice calm but steely, eyes sharp. "They believe chaos will consume us. But they don't know we thrive in it." Vincent allowed himself a rare smile, dark and dangerous. She had changed the rules of his empire simply by existing in it, her courage, insight, and unyielding presence challenging him to see beyond control, beyond fear, beyond the predictable mechanics of power. The first strike erupted at the docks. Flames licked the night sky, gunfire shattered the air, and rival soldiers fell under Vincent's calculated assault. She moved with lethal grace, guiding men, deflecting danger, and fighting with a courage that made even Vincent momentarily lose himself in admiration and desire. Every brush of their hands, every glance exchanged amidst the chaos, was a silent affirmation: they were bound not only by survival but by an undeniable, dark love that thrived in fire and shadow. The battle spread across the city. Rivals regrouped, ambushed, and struck from unexpected angles. Vincent and she moved as one through alleys and abandoned warehouses, their coordination flawless, their trust unbreakable. Yet danger was omnipresent. At one point, a rival sniper took aim at her from a rooftop, and instinctively, Vincent threw himself in front of her, taking a grazing shot across his shoulder. Pain flared, but he didn't falter. She rushed to his side, adrenaline and fear mixing in her veins. "You're reckless," she hissed, hands gripping his arm. He met her gaze, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "And yet, I would do it again." The confrontation reached its peak at the heart of the coalition's headquarters, a fortified warehouse rigged with explosives, armed guards, and traps designed to kill anyone who dared enter. Vincent and she led the assault, clearing rooms, neutralizing threats, and dismantling the coalition's leadership with precision. Every move was a dance of strategy and instinct, of fear and desire, of power and humanity. The city's fate teetered in their hands, and every heartbeat mattered. In a climactic moment, Vincent faced the coalition's head, a man as ruthless as he was cunning. Bullets exchanged, fists collided, and strategy met sheer force. She intervened at the perfect moment, guiding Vincent to a tactical advantage, her instincts saving him from a deadly blow. Together, they defeated the final opposition, dismantling the coalition completely. The city, for the first time in weeks, was silent, its chaos replaced by the aftermath of calculated victory. Exhausted, bloodied, yet victorious, they stood atop the Marconi Tower, overlooking a city that belonged once again to Vincent's empire. The night was quiet, almost sacred. He turned to her, voice low, intimate, and raw with emotion. "I've never relied on anyone like this," he confessed, eyes dark, vulnerable yet commanding. She reached for his hand, intertwining their fingers with a mixture of relief, love, and exhilaration. "And I've never needed anyone like this," she replied, her voice steady yet soft. In that silence, amid the city's distant hum and the lingering smoke of battle, they recognized a truth neither could ignore: they had survived the storm, cemented their empire, and discovered a dark, consuming love that had been forged in fire, danger, and unyielding trust. The empire was secure, the rivals vanquished, but their bond was the real victory, a force beyond power, fear, or the chaos of the streets. The city below glimmered like a battlefield frozen in time, but above it all, atop the tower, two hearts beat in unison, undefeated, unstoppable, and undeniably intertwined. Power, strategy, and survival had brought them together, but only trust, courage, and love could keep them there. The dawn after the final confrontation cast a pale light over the city, illuminating streets still scarred by battle yet pulsing with renewed life. The rival coalition had been dismantled, their power fractured beyond repair, and Vincent's empire stood unchallenged. But amidst victory, the weight of consequences pressed heavily. Buildings were destroyed, lives lost, and even the most loyal allies bore the invisible scars of conflict. Vincent moved through the city like a shadow, ensuring loyalty, securing territories, and quietly reckoning with the cost of survival. She walked beside him, her presence a constant, grounding force. No longer simply a witness or partner in strategy, she had become the emotional compass in a world governed by fear and power. Her eyes reflected the exhaustion, the pain, and the quiet triumph of the nights past. Vincent noticed the subtle tremor in her hand when they surveyed the aftermath, and he instinctively reached out, gripping it firmly. "We did what we had to," he said, voice low, steady, and filled with authority tempered by human warmth. "And we survived, together." But survival had a cost beyond the physical. Vincent found himself confronting truths he had long denied: the loneliness of power, the burden of command, and the vulnerability that came with caring for someone as fearless and human as she was. She, too, revealed pieces of herself she had kept hidden: fears, dreams, and the quiet desire for connection in a world defined by violence. Their moments together were no longer just tactical, they were deeply personal, raw, and intimate. Every glance, every touch, every shared silence spoke of a bond forged in fire, danger, and unspoken desire. The consolidation of the empire required more than defeating rivals. Vincent and she worked tirelessly to re-establish loyalty, mend fractured alliances, and ensure that power was both respected and feared. Meetings with city officials, reconciliations with minor factions, and strategic adjustments became part of their daily life. She proved invaluable, her insight and empathy balancing Vincent's ruthlessness. And in the quiet moments between negotiations, amidst maps, ledgers, and city plans, they found fleeting moments of tenderness, a hand resting over another, a shared smile, a brush of fingers that carried more meaning than words ever could. Yet even in victory, shadows lingered. Vincent understood that power alone was insufficient. Humanity, trust, and connection were the true measures of lasting influence. He observed her interactions with the city, the people, and the men he trusted. She brought light into his empire's darkness, reminding him that strength without compassion was hollow, and loyalty without love was empty. And in the midst of rebuilding, he allowed himself to confront feelings he had long buried: admiration, desire, and the undeniable pull of dark, consuming love that she had awakened in him. One evening, atop the Marconi Tower, the city quiet beneath them, he finally spoke the truth he had held back. "I've ruled with fear, respect, and authority my entire life," he said, voice low, carrying both power and vulnerability. "But you've made me feel something more. Something dangerous. Something I can't ignore." She met his gaze steadily, her own eyes reflecting the same intensity, the same dangerous longing. "And I've found I can't survive without you. Not just your power, not just your presence, but you," she whispered. For a moment, the empire, the battles, and the chaos faded into the background. All that remained was them, two souls intertwined by trust, survival, and a dark, intoxicating love forged in the shadows of New York City. The night wind carried their unspoken promises across the skyline, a silent acknowledgement that whatever came next, they would face it together. The empire had been tested, loyalty had been earned, and love had been discovered in the unlikeliest of places. The streets were quiet, the threats diminished, and the shadows receded, at least for now. And amidst the ashes of battle and the weight of power, Vincent and she stood united, not just as rulers, strategists, or survivors, but as partners bound by something far more profound, dark, consuming love that neither power nor danger could sever. The city awoke to a fragile peace, streets still carrying faint scars of the battles that had raged through the night. Vincent's empire, once tested by fire, betrayal, and relentless enemies, now stood stronger than ever. Rival factions had either been absorbed, neutralized, or fled into the shadows, leaving the Moretti name synonymous with fear, respect, and unyielding authority. Yet, beyond the triumphs and the meticulous consolidation of power, Vincent knew the true victory lay not in territory or influence but in what he had discovered about himself, and about her. She walked beside him atop the Marconi Tower, the wind tugging at her hair, the city sprawling endlessly below them. In her eyes, Vincent saw the reflection of every danger they had faced, every near-death moment, and every shared heartbeat. Her presence was no longer merely strategic or protective, it was essential, irreplaceable, and deeply entwined with his own humanity. In the quiet of that early morning, amidst skyscrapers and the first faint light of dawn, the world felt theirs not just by power, but by the bond forged in shadow, blood, and fire. The final threats had been quelled. The coalition dismantled, the streets reclaimed, and loyalty within his empire restored. Vincent's men moved with disciplined respect, knowing that the city's king had survived every assault, and that the girl who had stood beside him was no mere apprentice or outsider. She was a partner, a force, and a presence that had altered the course of his empire. Their alliance had become legend within the mafia circles, a blend of fear, strategy, and human connection, impossible to ignore. Yet, victory carried a quieter, more intimate weight. Alone, atop the tower, Vincent reached for her hand. "We've rebuilt," he said, voice low, intimate, yet carrying the authority of a man who had conquered every challenge. "But more importantly, I've realized something I can no longer ignore." She turned to him, anticipation and vulnerability flashing in her eyes. "And that is?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper against the wind. He stepped closer, his presence commanding yet tender. "You are not just part of this empire. You are part of me. Every risk, every choice, every battle, led me to you. And I will not lose you, not to the streets, not to the shadows, not to anything." She let her gaze soften, the tension and danger of months collapsing into a single moment of clarity. "Then we face the world together," she said, entwining her fingers with his. "No one, no threat, can change that." In that shared silence, above the city that had tested them, survived with them, and ultimately bowed to their influence, Vincent allowed himself to feel fully love, trust, desire, and the rare, dangerous warmth of human connection. It was a love forged in darkness yet illuminated by their courage and loyalty, a bond as unbreakable as the empire he ruled. The final days of consolidation passed without major threats. The city's underworld acknowledged the Moretti dominance, power stabilized, and whispers of their legend spread from docks to clubs to the corridors of power. Yet through it all, Vincent and she remained not just rulers, but partners in the truest sense, navigating the delicate balance of authority, survival, and a love that had survived the storm of fire, bullets, betrayal, and shadow. One evening, in the quiet of the Marconi Tower, Vincent finally allowed himself to relax, leaning close to her, the city lights casting their shadows across the room. "We've survived everything," he murmured, voice low and intimate. "But this, us, is the real victory." She smiled, her hand resting on his chest, feeling the pulse of both his heart and the empire he had built. "Then let's ensure it lasts," she whispered, eyes shimmering with both love and the fire that had carried them through. And as the city below settled into a fragile peace, Vincent and she stood together, the empire secure, rivals vanquished, and their hearts entwined in a dark, consuming love that neither power nor danger could sever. The streets may have been ruled by fear, the clubs by strategy, and the city by authority, but at the heart of it all, in the silence above the skyline, two souls had discovered the ultimate truth: trust, loyalty, and love, dark, intoxicating, and unbreakable, were worth more than any empire, more than any victory, and more than any shadow the world could cast. The city slept beneath them, but Vincent and she were awake, alive, and victorious, not just as rulers, but as partners bound by fire, blood, and a love that would endure beyond the reach of power, beyond the shadow of fear, and beyond the chaos of the streets. As the final scene closes, a soft voiceover would say, "In a world built on fear, power, and shadows, true strength lies in trust, loyalty, and the unexpected love that can illuminate even the darkest corners of our hearts."